mentioning all these places I've been, what I thought of was yesterday morning and the morning before, I went out jogging around this fine town, and I'm here to tell you I am very happy to be in Green Bay. Let me tell you about a puzzle I have. Maybe somebody here can explain it to me sometime. I really don't understand this. I teach at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, and I get a paycheck. And the question I always, sometimes occurs to me is, where is this money coming from? And when I'm jogging around yesterday and the day before, I think it comes from Green Bay. That's where it comes from, and places like this. Because, I don't understand economics very well, but it does seem to me that places like Green Bay, where you bring in wood and sulfur and a few other things, and you make paper products, the value of the wood and the sulfur and so on is down here, and the value of the paper products is way up there. And that's where the money is made, in the manufacturing plants. And with that money that is made, the value that's added, you pay for the wood and the sulfur, and you pay your salaries, and then you give some money to the state, you give some money, and that's what comes back to me in Madison. Yes. And I think that's the way it works. But then I thought as I was jogging around that if you had a map of the U.S. and you put down plus signs and big plus signs over the bigger contributors of the cities that make the money, and you put minus signs over cities that use the money, there'd be a big plus sign over Green Bay and a big minus sign over Madison. And then, where we make our money in this country is in manufacturing plants. And what are we doing in the U.S.? We're sending our manufacturing plants overseas. So, isn't that a bad idea? I would think that we'd want to strengthen places like Green Bay and make them work better and make the money. My fundamental question is, where does the money come from? And I really do believe it comes from places like Procter & Gamble and Green Bay. Now, one fact is that for the first time since World War I, the U.S. is a debtor nation. We owe people now. And that hasn't been true since World War I. And I think that has something to do with all this. And what we're here to talk about is how to make Procter & Gamble run better. And I really am happy to be here. I am very happy and even honored to be involved with Procter & Gamble, because I remember when I was an undergraduate that Procter & Gamble had the best jobs. All my chemical engineering friends, they wanted to go work for Procter & Gamble in the summers, and after they got done, Procter & Gamble was the #1 company. Also, another reason why I'm happy to be here is just that presentation yesterday. Now, there are a few people in this room who weren't there yesterday, but they really missed something. Yesterday I will not soon forget. In fact, I don't think I'll ever forget. Yesterday there were a lot of things that represented, and certainly one was an enlightened leadership in Green Bay. It was very, very impressive. One thing I thought of this morning, having breakfast, was a videotape I saw once where someone was explaining the difference between some companies in the U.S. and some companies in Japan. And they were saying that the U.S. companies seem to be like a train, and up at the front there's the engine, and that's where the motor is, and that's what pulls it along. And the big bosses tell everybody what to do, and then everybody does it. And then this person was saying that in Japan, we like to run things differently. And that the engine is not just up in front and we all follow. We want to have all the employees have their own motors, and they start their own engines, and that's much more powerful. And what I heard yesterday, in terms of that kind of analogy, was, well, I thought of the Indianapolis 500, where the traditional start is, gentlemen, start your engines. Now, I realize I'm at P&G, so what I heard yesterday was a version of that, which is, ladies and gentlemen, start your engines. That's what I heard yesterday. The leadership was saying they want everybody in this room and everybody in Procter & Gamble to start their engines. And let's go. Let's all contribute. And another thing they said is, this is where we want to be. This is what we want this company to be like. This is a vision. This is where we want to go. So, on the one hand, they're saying, start your engines and let's go. On the other hand, this is where we want to be. Well, of course, there's something missing, and that is how you get from starting your engines to where you want to go. We need a roadmap. Okay? In a very real sense, that's what we're here to talk about for these 2 days, is a roadmap. And tomorrow, in fact, we'll end up with a videotape called A Roadmap to Change. It'll be the Deming approach. So Deming really describes a roadmap of how to go from where we are now to, that vision that was described yesterday. And a number of the things that were said yesterday, not surprisingly, come out of Deming. And I think you will hear a lot of echoes. Okay. What we want to talk about then is quality as a journey to excellence. And I guess the way it's been described around Procter & Gamble is a pathway to excellence. And the purpose of my remarks here, before we actually see these films with Deming, is just to set the stage for spending some time with W. Edwards Deming. And what I'll be doing is this. There'll be 4 parts to these remarks. One is, I'd just like to spend a few minutes just stepping back from Procter & Gamble and Green Bay and just looking a little bit at the bigger picture. And then, secondly, to introduce Deming as a person, just to say a few things about him. And thirdly, to talk about quality improvement as the driver. And then 4, to list some aspects of Deming's philosophy. And they won't be in exactly his words, but this may help some of you just appreciate what Deming is saying. I invite you, as we go along on this journey for these couple of days together, to notice these banners that are up here of excellence, growth, and diversity. And I can't see that first one, but trust and team. What's that one around the corner? Ownership. And I think there's some connections between what we're talking about and those 6 values. And that they're not just there for decoration. I think what we have to say connects to 1 or 2 of them or more in some rather direct way. And I invite you to just think about that, to think of how what we're talking about relates to those, if what we're talking about relates to them at all, and if they do relate to them, which 1 or 2 or 3 or more what we have to say connects to. Okay, how does what we're talking about relate to those 6 things? Okay, as far as this number 1, this bigger picture, on a national level, I mentioned this business about the U.S. as a debtor nation. For the first time since World War I. I mean, that's a significant event. I mean, that's not very good for us to be owing people. And the trend is down. I mean, it's going to get worse. So that means us and our children are going to have to pay off these people overseas. I mean, that's serious. Now here is moving down another level, just to a business level. Here are some businesses. Automobiles, cameras, stereo components, and so on. What I invite you to do here is to look at that list and see if you can figure out what all of those things have in common. All of them. I mean, what's in common in that whole list? Okay? What do all those things have in common? Why don't we just take a minute or so and just talk to your people in your group and see if you can come up with some things. What's common among all those things? Any ideas at this point? Any groups figured out some things? Anybody? Yeah.
Things made in Japan or things developed in the United States but produced somewhere else.
Developed in the U.S. and produced someplace else. Okay. Anybody else? Anything?
The best value of those products come from other places also.
You mean outside the U.S.? The best value outside the U.S.? Anybody else? Anything?
They've taken market supremacy in the last 5 to 10 years.
That's pretty close to what the punchline that I had on this, which is this. They are all sizable industries, and they aren't really all technologically sophisticated, but the real kicker is this one, that the U.S. worldwide market share has slipped by at least 50% in the last decade, and this was from 1974 to 1984. In every single one of those industries, the U.S. has lost it. Okay, then let me just switch to one particular industry, which is the room-sized air conditioners. And there is a professor at Harvard Business School by the name of David Garvin, who is doing some of the best work on quality these days, as far as really probing what quality really is, where it fits in strategically in business plans and so on. And I understand that he's writing a book. He's written some papers that have appeared in various business journals. But his study that has made him famous is he made a very, very careful study of the room-sized air conditioner industry in the U.S. and in Japan. He visited a number of companies over here and a number of companies in Japan. He got inside the companies. He got access to their records. And he's published these results. And one of the results he published was the average number of assembly line defects per 100 units. The average number of assembly line defects per 100 units. And in Japan, in the US, it was 63.5. 63.5 defects per 100 units. Anybody want to make a guess as to what it was in Japan? Well, yeah, why don't you guess? I mean, 63.5. 5%, I heard over here, 2%. That's not low enough. Anybody else? Yeah, it's less than 1. Okay? 63.5 to less than 1. now the room-sized air conditioners from Japan haven't come over here, I don't think. I don't know whether they are, but I would think that doesn't make our folks feel so good. There's another one. It's actually 0.95. Here you have the service call rate. This is first year warranty. And once again, per 100 units, how many times do they have to make service calls? What is it in Japan? It's 0.6. That's about 17 times greater. Anyway, there's a lot more to this, to that particular study. One of my friends bought a compressor company. He doesn't know anything about making compressors. He's a lawyer. And he knows about leveraged buyouts and so on. But anyway, he bought a compressor company, and then, and the compressor's gone to air conditioners. And, well, I worry anyway. Now, just one more of these things. June 16th, 1985, the New York Times had an article about, it's called Pushing America Out of Chips. It's about the memory chip market in the U.S. And that, one quote in the article says that the battle in this memory market is over. The Japanese won. And then what it says is, just a summer ago, the makers of computer chips rode atop the high-tech world. To supply parts for a seemingly insatiable computer industry, giants like Texas Instruments and Mazdek raced to retool their plants for a new generation of memory chips. The three Silicon Valley stalwarts, National Semiconductor, Advanced Micro Devices, and Intel, spent hundreds of millions of dollars adding plant capacity, sure of a quick payback. This summer, in hindsight, those grand expansion plans looked like they were assembled by brash river explorers who discovered too late that the noise ahead is Niagara Falls. A huge flow of Japanese-made chips has plunged American semiconductor makers into their deepest slump ever. More importantly, the downturn has brought permanent damage to one of the few manufacturing industries whose rapid growth had raised hopes of supplanting the declining rust industries. Americans continue to be amazed at the progress their Japanese competitors have made in manufacturing technology. Recently, reports coming out of Japan indicate that some yields on established products like 64K RAMs may be running as high as 90%. That's 25% higher than most U.S. makers obtain. A vice president from National Semiconductor, who has spent much time in Japan, said they invariably move up the learning curve faster. Before they put a product into production, they have done so much detailed planning and review, much more than we have the dedication to do here, that very little goes wrong. Anyhow, there's that. Now I do want to pause at this point and tell you that I do not believe the Japanese companies are always better than the U.S. companies, or that the Japanese are better than the Americans. I don't believe that, okay? It's just in a lot of industries right now, Japan is doing quite well, okay? And I know a lot of people, and maybe there's some in this room, who are getting sick and tired of hearing about the Japanese. But I take my cue from Ben Boer yesterday when he said one of the principles should be to tell it like it is. So I'm just telling it like it is. I mean, what I've told you is just facts, that's all. Let me tell you a story, though, that relates to this point. Some of you may have heard this, and if you'll just bear with me, about these three people who were arrested for doing some terrible things. And then they were all going to be shot, these three people. And one was a Frenchman, and one was an American, and one was a Japanese. And then right before they were going to be shot, they were asked whether they had any last requests, anything they could satisfy them with. And the Frenchman said he would like to hear the Marseillaise played one more time, and they said, okay, we think we can arrange that. And then they asked the Japanese guy what he would like, and he said, I want to give one more lecture on Japanese management practices, at which point the American said, I would like to be shot first. So, I mean, I sympathize with people getting fed up with hearing about the Japanese, but yet it's true that they seem to be doing some things right. I'd just like to switch here and read a couple of quotes that actually appeared in the Harvard Business Review, and there was an article written on labor management relations by Donald Scoble, and a letter was published from Russell Schrader, who is a field representative of AFL-CIO Region 3. And what he wrote about the present system in the U.S. is as follows: that the present system in the U.S. has not provided for any meaningful contribution from the workers themselves to improve the methods of production and the quality of work life. They have no opportunity to exercise their judgment, imagination, creativity, or versatility in ways that could contribute to their productivity and sense of dignity. It is no surprise that they undergo frustration and discouragement, feeling certainly not apt to contribute to their efficiency. The solution to our productivity problem is the necessity for management and labor to recognize the intrinsic value of the human being. The author, Scoble, replied by saying that in the last 4 years when he had done this research for the article, I have heard employees say over and over again in their own vernacular, I want to contribute more than the organization will let me. I want to contribute more than the organization will let me. Well, what I've done is to finish the first part of these remarks, and what this indicates to me is trouble at all levels. I mean, at a national level, we're a debtor nation for the first time, and there are other national problems you can mention. At the corporate level, that list of all those industries, the rear-size air conditioners, memory chips, and also even at the individual level. Now, what I heard yesterday was, I mean, to me, very exciting, because the leadership was saying that in Procter & Gamble, at any rate, it's quite hopeful at this level, because what they're saying is, we do want individuals to contribute. We want them to contribute more than they have in the past, and they have every confidence that that will happen, and they're willing to remove barriers, and they want to remove barriers so people can contribute. And that's what we're going to be talking about, is how people can contribute more. That's what we're going to be talking about. And we're also going to be talking some about what happens at the corporate level at P&G. Well, the conclusion that I come to from just looking at all this trouble at all these levels is something that Bob Vander Wal said yesterday. He put it in these words, that we need to change how we do things. I mean, we have to change. Well, that's simple to say. How do you do it? Okay. Now Deming has some ideas of how this can be done. And so now I want to shift to the second part of my remarks and just say a few words by way of introduction to Deming. And let me put up this from an ad that's appeared in Fortune and also the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere from Sumitomo Metals. It's headlined, "The most famous name in Japanese quality control is American." And it's a big picture of Deming and the Deming Prize and how Sumitomo Metals got one of the early Deming Prizes, and they were proud of it. And this ad ends up, and incidentally in the whole ad it doesn't say by Sumitomo Metals. It just goes on about all this quality in Deming and how they won the Deming Prize. And it ends up saying, thanks Dr. Deming for helping to start it all in Japan and in Sumitomo Metals. Now, Deming was born in 1900, so it's easy to figure out how old he is. He just had a birthday a week or so ago, and so now he's 85 years old. And you'd think when you got to be 85 years old that you would be retired, if you were alive at all. and you would be resting, and you know, you play with your grandchildren and great-grandchildren and all that. Well, Deming isn't like that. During World War II, he had the idea that statistical quality control should be taught to people in American industries so that bullets would fit the rifles and things like that. And they actually had a major campaign of having lots and lots of short courses. And Deming is the one who really got those started, because a letter went out from the War Department to all these universities, about 200 universities, saying, what can you do for the war effort? And at Stanford, someone at Stanford showed Deming this letter, and Deming said we should have short courses and teach people about statistical quality control. And so, in fact, there were many, many short courses on statistical quality control, and there was great success with these. But immediately after World War II, everything sort of fizzled out, and nobody used these ideas anymore in U.S. industry. I mean, that's an overstatement, but basically that's what happened. About in 1950, in 1950, Deming went to Japan, and he was invited to talk about statistical quality control to Japanese industrialists. One of the things Mike didn't mention is that I lived in Japan for 3 years, and I was actually in Japan before Deming was. Because I was pretty young, I wasn't doing anything, but except having a good time. What he said was, he reasoned to himself that there was all this effort made in the U.S. to get things going, and nothing was happening anymore. So he thought if the Japanese were going to do something, the key thing that was missing was commitment from top management. So he said, top managers have to come and listen to me. So that's what he said. And what they did was they got a number of presidents from companies. They invited them to come to hear Deming, and they all showed up. And the night before Deming was going to talk to these people, he knew it was important to talk to top management and get their commitment, but he didn't know what he was going to say. So he stayed up very late that night figuring out what he was going to say. Now, I found this out when I was on my way to Singapore, because right as I was going to Singapore, this was in 1969, I figured Singapore was ready to start a national movement in quality control, and they certainly could. And so I called up Deming and said, I'm going to Singapore, and do you have any words of advice? And he talked for a long time, and I took some notes on what he was saying, and I came across them some years later. And it just sort of jumped out at this page at me that here he was going to talk to the Japanese managers, the presidents of companies, and the night before he didn't really know what he wanted to tell them. I mean, he had to figure that out and stay up late at night, doing all this. And that struck me as a surprise, because I figured when Deming was born in 1900, his 14 points were, with him. I've always thought that. I don't know. There was some irrational kind of belief of that kind. But at any rate, he did talk to the top managers. They did listen, and they went out and they tried things. And they didn't have money to buy new equipment or anything like that, but they just tried different methods and tried some statistics and so on, and they met again in a matter of a few weeks. And some people reported improvements in productivity of 40% and things in 3 weeks and things like that. And so then everybody else, all these other presidents thought, well, maybe there's something in this. And then they just started working. And they've been working at it for a long, long time. A long time. But they did get he got commitment of top management, and then the Japanese really do give Deming credit for what they've been able to do since World War II. They have a Deming Prize that they award. It's the highest award you can get in Japan in companies. And when companies get it, they advertise. And I remember reading in the Wall Street Journal once this story that started off with this Japanese guy in his business suit, and he was answering questions for, the committee was asking him questions about the business and about how do you know that the accounting department is more efficient now than it was 6 months ago, and show me the data. And he would have to scurry back and get some data and show it to this committee, and they would say, what about this number? What does that mean? What does this mean? And all the rest. And this guy was going through an examination of some kind, and he was perspiring and all the rest. And then it said, at the end of about the third paragraph, it said, Mr. Tanimoto is rehearsing for his Deming Prize interview. And I mean, this wasn't even the real thing. This was just practice, you know, for this committee that was going to come in and decide who was going to get the Deming Prize. I was told yesterday that there was an item in the paper that Texas Instruments has gotten a Deming Prize, being the first American company to get one. I don't know whether that's true or not. But at any rate, the Deming Prize in Japan is a big deal. And I've heard it's presented in the way the Academy Awards are presented here. I mean, you know, lots of television and lots of hoopla and all the rest. And I'll get to see next week or so, because we'll go over and watch this whole thing. Now, what Deming is doing now, he gives 4-day seminars. He's 85 years old, and he gives 4-day seminars, and he talks for 6 hours each day for 4 days. That's Tuesday through Thursday. Tuesday through Friday, okay? Those 4 days. And on Friday, he goes back home to Washington, D.C., and then he works over the weekend. And then on Monday, he generally teaches at NYU, New York University, and on Tuesday, he starts a 4-day seminar. And he gives these 4-day seminars all over the U.S. and all around the world. But he figures it's important for him to do this. And so there he is out giving these 4-day seminars. So he believes in all this. He's also writing a book. There's a preliminary version of the book that's out, and it's called Quality, Productivity, and Competitive Position. It's in paperback, but now he's going to put it out in hardback. And it's revised, because he always keeps revising things. And the new title is going to be Out of the Crisis. That's the book that's coming out, and he really does work over the weekends, okay? I mean, this Sunday, my son comes to me and he says, someone is on the phone asking for Dr. William Hunter. And so I got on the phone, and here was Deming, and he was saying, do you think I should get this book out and just start working on the second edition? And I said, yeah, you should get this book out. And he's been working on this book for a long, long time. So anyway, he's very hardworking. He's going full tilt, and he's 85 years old, and he's got all these clients, and he does all these seminars, and it's really amazing. I mean, it's just a phenomenon. And what you're going to be able to see is a videotape of him explaining his 14 points. One thing you should realize is that he does keep revising things. And when you see the tapes, it will be a certain version of the 14 points. We'll give you the latest version, which came out last month and has changed a bit. And a version that came before the ones that you're going to see in these tapes had as point number 1, innovation, or innovate. That was point number 1. And it's interesting to me that John Saxton talked about quality, innovation, and people. And innovation is definitely one of the things that Deming talks about, and it's now incorporated in point number 1. So when we get to the tape number 1, you should, just be aware of the fact that Deming does talk about innovation in that tape number 1. But he does keep changing things. He keeps changing things all the time, and that's why this book of his, Out of the Crisis, has not come out yet. Okay, so that's the second part. Let me just remind you of where we are here. I said what I want to do is talk something about the bigger picture, not just Procter & Gamble, to put things in context, and then to just give you a short introduction to Deming, his person. And what I'd like to get into now is quality improvement as a driver, and to talk something about that. But in transition here, let me just read you something from Fortune magazine. Deming claims that we should not export American management principles abroad, at least to any friendly country. He says things like that. In Fortune magazine, this was September 30, 1985, it's not very old, there's a letter from Yokohama in Japan from a Mr. Fuseya. And the letter goes as follows. While I am dead against import barrier alleged to be existing in my country, I do not want to import American MBAs. We have been doing quite well without them. The reason this struck me was that I'm sure Deming would approve of that particular quote. He thinks that our business schools are not teaching the right things. All right, now quality as driver. One thing that's happened when people go to Japan to see what the secret is about how they're able to make automobiles and so on that seem to work, they look and they're continually surprised because they think they're going to see a lot of high technology and they don't see it in a lot of industries. They see equipment that's pretty much like their own equipment. One of our largest industries actually had permission to take photographs all over the place in one of their competitors in Japan, and they had all these photographs studied by their engineers and consultants and everything, and the conclusion they came to was it's basically what we have. I mean, it's not the technology. Now, the American visitors do hear about quality control, but they tend to brush it off as, well, we have quality control, we have a quality control department, and so, we'll just work a little harder in the quality control department. Well, what they miss is that in Japan, when the Japanese talk about quality control, what a better translation into English would be excellence. I mean, it's a much more all-encompassing idea than what we think of as quality control. I mean, quality is just everywhere, everywhere. There is an excellent book that's just come out, written by Kaoru Ishikawa. It's called Total Quality Control, the Japanese Way. And it's published by Prentice Hall. Prentice Hall ran off, their first printing, and just like that, it was all gone. And Prentice Hall was just really surprised. I mean, it was like, what's happening? I mean, they didn't think it would all sell out, but it is. It's all sold out, and now they're trying to print up enough. But people really want to get that book. It's an excellent, excellent book. And I'll read you, a few things from it later on in the 2 days. But he does make the point that when the Japanese talk about quality and having quality in an organization, it means not only the quality of the product, but the quality of the processes producing the product, the quality of the designs that go into the processes and the product, quality people, quality systems, quality everything, quality service, just quality through and through everywhere. And what they're really talking about is a new way to manage and run organizations. And Ishikawa talks about it as a thought revolution for managers. And that's what a lot of American visitors to Japan have dismissed. I mean, they see the quality control, but what they perceive as something that's pretty small. And now people are beginning to learn, because for one thing, Deming is starting to be asked to give seminars in the US, and people are listening to him. But the real problem is going to be, the American industries can see, by golly, we can make really improvements pretty fast if we get ourselves organizing and going. But the Japanese are continuing to go, and they're going to move ahead some more. And I often think of times when I'm trying to finish up a project, and you must have the same kind of feeling sometimes when you finish up a project, you're about 90% through, and it's just frustrating trying to get the last 10% wrapped up. And it's like, it's really true, this I heard once about the first 90% of the project takes 90% of the time, and the last 10% of the project takes the other 90% of the time. And so, although gains will be fast over here, the Japanese are working on the other part, which is, in a way, not, they can't see such high gains, but although they're not very high gains, out there after you get going, it just takes an awful lot of work to get that little more gain. Those of you who play golf will know what I mean when you try to, get the average down by 5 more strokes or something. It's like, it's impossible. But anyway, that's one thing. That quality, a much better translation of quality, as the Japanese talk about it, is excellence. It's a whole way of running a whole business. It's not what Americans tend to think of as a quality control department. Right? One way that I most often define quality, a quality product, is one that meets or exceeds the needs and expectations of the customers. And I think I heard that phrase more times yesterday than any other phrase. Oh no, except I guess the freedom to be all that you can be. I heard that more. But anyway, this is what quality is. And incidentally, the freedom to be all that you can be, that also, it seems to me, it comes into here, because the customer is not just the people outside P&G, the customers are the people inside P&G too. I mean, they're the people you send stuff to. And you're a customer to somebody else in P&G probably who sends things to you. And if you're really talking to one another, talking to your suppliers and talking to your customers internally in P&G, what you want to be doing is breaking down barriers and making things work better, and in fact, creating the freedom to be all that you can be. I mean, that's intimately tied in with this, as my understanding. And then this business about continuous, never-ending improvement, that is also part of what this whole quality is about. And one thing I did hear yesterday, Ben Boer saying that it's never arriving. You're never satisfied, you always keep working, you never arrive. So I also heard him say it this morning, right here. He said it again. I mean, that's what this is about. I mean, that's what the goal is, in a sense, is you just never-ending improvement. You just keep going and going and going. And it's impossible to get to a place where you say, okay, now things are perfect and they can't be improved anymore. And it makes life a lot more exciting and interesting when you get into this. So that quality is really a journey, and it's not a destination. But I think again of this blue van that started to roll down the street. I mean, it's not just a journey anywhere. I mean, it's supposed to be, you want to get it pointed, and we want to get ourselves pointed, and we also want a driver. So here is the way I start out defining what quality is. That quality really is that what you want to do is meet and, if possible, exceed the needs and expectations of customers. Okay. At this point, what we'd like to do is to look at this first videotape of, this comes from In Search of Excellence, a bigger program. Some of you may have seen it on TV. And this segment has to do with a fellow by the name of Stu Leonard, who, how many of you have seen this Stu Leonard piece before? Okay, well, you will, I can guarantee you will enjoy it again. I mean, it just shows what's possible when you focus on the customer. Okay, so we'll look at this.